Horizon just home reaction. This is why 75% of Indian women are unemployed by the channel Polymatter. Another Polymatter video. I did the Russian thing, how Russia is running out of people. Now, I'm an Indian, but I live in a major city, and well, let's just say I'm doing fine, right? So I'm not living amongst the people or community that, let's just say, might be like 90+% of people that might fall into that category in India. But so, you know, I'm surrounded by people and women who basically like employed, let's just say, who like, but I'm not oblivious. So only thing I can think of right now is like how Indian society has been for years, and it's not that easy to like let go of that mentality, even though India is rapidly changing, right? So it's all based on cultural thing, right? Like, you know, man of the house works, woman of the house doesn't work type of shit, right? It's changing constantly, right? Because the modern world already doesn't have that kind of like mentality. India is you know, democracy, capitalist, sure, why not? So India constantly access to internet, and world constantly looks to places like America and UK. So the mentality is constantly changing about everything, right? Especially the old way of thinking like that. And when you're like, you know, money crunch, right? People like suddenly realize that I don't care about culture, I need to work type of way. So it's changing a lot, especially in cities. But yes, there are many places around the country, the old thinking still there. And those many places are also like rural village area type of way, and that can't 1.4 billion people, majority of them are living in these rural places, not major cities, right? When you think of India, you need to understand like modern cities, right? And people living in this modern world might as well be 300-400 million. That's equivalent to US's population, but it's 1.4 billion, so others are rural places and things like that. India can be 4 countries in one type of way. So when people think of India as an image of India, they think of like those Mumbai, and what is that place? I saw the real life lore video. You know, dense place where everybody's living like, you know, really bad condition. But there are also like very like who's like third richest and fourth richest person are Indians, right? One is Ambani, one is Adani, and things like that. There are many rich people, right? Even the middle class rich, right? The area where I live, like I'm staying constantly like Lamborghinis and Bentleys and shit. I'm like, what the fuck? I remember 20 years ago, I couldn't even see one, right? There was a time where a Hayabusa, the bike, was a big thing. When I see in street, oh, that's something. Nowadays, I see the left and right, like what the hell? So India is changing a lot, but a majority of India is like rural village area, and that old mentality is still there. So I'm guessing that must be the reason. But yeah, Polymeter is a great channel, 2 million subscribers. And he, you know, obviously he's gonna go in depth in here. What is the reason? And I'm being Indian. Hopefully, I'll know a thing or two to talk about this video. So yeah, let's do this one. Remember, flag my and don't forget to subscribe. So I don't know which type of videos to react to more. You want me to do Indian style videos more since I'm Indian? If that's what you want, comment down so I'll know it. I guess, I don't know. Or you want me to do other type of videos that I've been doing? I don't know. So yeah, comment down. Let's do this one.
3 out of 4 Indian women are unemployed. That's more than Saudi Arabia, a country where women have only been allowed to drive since 2018. This is no statistical sleight of hand. In fact, 3 out of 4 is wildly conservative. This number, called the labor force participation rate, includes both anyone with or without a job, as long as they're looking, however passively. Of those 24% of women technically in the labor force, many don't actually work. Then there's the question of what counts as employment. In this case,
you also need to understand that India is like dense place, 1.4 billion. You can't ask everyone, and not everyone's gonna have details and receipts or like paper trail of who works where. So these statistics could be warped, right? People work and they get money for it, but it might not be documented type of way, right? India is still growing.
The answer is as little as 1 hour each week of paid labor. Put differently, of India's 1.4 billion people, 681 million are women. 509 million of those are at least 15 years old. 122 million officially in the labor force, and a tiny 38 million, 8.8% according to one Indian think tank, meaningfully employed. In a country
I
of
don't know.
1.4 billion, in other words, just 38 million women have jobs. The United States, by contrast...
See, the thing with that is, if you look at all the major cities, I'm living in one of them, and you just like tally them like how many women are there working, I'm pretty sure it would dwarf the figure of 38 million. So I don't know, like how did you come to the statistic? And India is a really hard country to find statistic, let's just say. It's surprising how India does election in the first place, especially the modern election, where they had to go at what length just to make sure everybody has chance to vote.
Has twice as many women employed in absolute terms with only 1/4 the population. How can that possibly be true? Could it be that Indian households are now rich enough to comfortably subsist on one income? No, far from it. The country's per capita GDP is less than $2,400, just 1/5 the world average and where China was about 20 years ago. Is it because women lack access to education? According to the World Bank, better educated women are more likely to participate in the formal labor market. Again, no. Strangely, in India, educated women are less likely to find employment. College enrollment has soared since the turn of the century, yet women's participation in the labor force has actually been on a steady decline until very recently. Perhaps it's precisely because women are in school, studying rather than working. Nope, it's not that either, since older women are also missing from the labor force. Finally, could it be an issue of personal safety or cultural expectations? Certainly, this is a major piece of the puzzle. India is one of the world's most dangerous countries for women. Just getting to and from work safely presents a not insignificant challenge. Meanwhile, 99% of Indian women eventually get married. 90% of those marriages are arranged, and women...
Look man, statistics can be really problematic in India since 1.4 billion, so every statistic you can find is going to be overblown. It's like that Bill Burr joke, right? You can find like how many people Napoleon killed, how many people Hitler killed, and then you come to like Asia, like China and India, it's like those numbers are like steroid numbers. That's the statistic. Yes, it's dangerous for women obviously because India is too big of population. How are you going to police that and govern that very easily, right? Major cities and places are easily governable, like you know, if you come to like major, not even major, like decent enough cities, if you go there, it's gonna be like safe enough, right? You can walk around at like at night at 2, even if you're women. I see that all the time, right? I don't live in the major cities like Mumbai and Delhi, Ahmedabad type of, I don't live there. Major enough, right? There are too many cities. If you're living in cities, sure, but yeah, rural places that are really hard to like, you know, police and things, it's gonna be much dangerous. I still think it must be a cultural thing, right? Because in India, it's like, you know, like he said, like arrangements and things, like certain old thinking is still there, is slowly going away. And like, even if you have something like a master's degree or something, people are like, okay, we are rich house, right? We own a business, you don't have to work type of mentality. That case is also that high. I don't know.
Women are expected to do nearly all of the housework. An extraordinary 6% of men report doing any cooking whatsoever, and only 8% do at least some cleaning. More of women's time spent cooking and cleaning is less time for paid labor. Case closed. Except, hang on, take a look at India's neighbor on 3 sides, Bangladesh. The two countries rank nearly identically on the Women's Peace and Security Index. That is, very poorly. They share many of the same cultural norms, practices, and beliefs. And yet, women in Bangladesh work at a much higher rate. Clearly, there's much more to this story. What's really going on? The answer lies in this graph. But first, a brief aside. In India, like many countries, a family's honor depends on the purity of its daughters. Any time spent outside the home, for example at work, exposes women to accusations of promiscuity, tarnishing her family's honor. Parents, therefore, strongly pressure their daughters.
Again, I live in cities, so I might have like different I don't think that's the case, right? I see everywhere like that's, yeah, that kind of thinking is not here. But then again, like I said, there are many rural places that might look like completely different country than people who live in city, right? Like I say, India could be 4 different countries, right? That's how difference there are. So that might be the case in rural areas. I don't know.
To stay home. Of course, working also has its benefits. Children are expected to contribute financially. This presents a trade-off between income and honor. And since honor is more or less a constant, the important variable here are wages. For any given family, is the extra money generated by allowing your daughter to work worth the damage to your reputation, and by extension, her marriage prospects? When families are poor, this loss of honor is strongly preferable to the alternative, starvation.
Yeah,
women have no choice. They have to work. Conversely, when wages are high, they offset this honor penalty, causing women to rejoin the workforce. India, as a country, is stuck at the bottom of this U-curve, what Dr. Alice Evans of King's College London calls the patrilineal trap. Wages are just barely high enough that families can scrape by on one income, but not high enough to draw women back to the workplace. Women are trapped between low wages.
That's changing though, right? The more India is becoming Western, let's just say, right? iPhone is important apparently. I didn't know that. I see, let's just say somebody who works at a petrol station or something with an iPhone. I'm like, damn, that's something. I wouldn't have seen that 10 years ago. But then I realized like he scraped by money, did extra job, right? He's in family, like his wife is also working things. So like in cities, things are changing. Rural places are also kind of changing because of the internet age. In 2016, when Modi came to power, he just made this big deal about like everybody should have access to internet. Then Reliance, basically one of the top 5 richest guy, basically got into that action, right? And now even the rural places have like something like 4G and like Wi-Fi places, like open places. Like what the fuck? I was surprised. I went to a hut type of looking village, and there was a sign here like Wi-Fi zone. Like what the fuck? So it's changing slowly. Obviously, like I think India will take 20 or so years before India can be like China, who like feels more Western. Right? If you go to China, most places will look Western, right? That wasn't the case 20 years ago, right? 20 years ago, people were walking bicycle. Now everybody has like big ass luxury sedans. India will take time to get there, but slowly changing that.
And suffocating social norms. They do go to college, though mainly to find a husband. And they do want to work.
Not really. Okay, it's... I don't know how to say that. It's like one of those things, like, what are you, stupid? Like, it's one of those things, it's trait. Like, if you're not educated, you're a moron type of mentality, right? People already heard of how Asians put pressure in educations. India is obviously part of that, right? That's why in Western world, wherever you see like some CEO, like some doctor, there's always some Indian there because of this thing. Since the day one, the pressure is much higher, right? I still remember when I was a kid going to school, my weight of the books and my bag was much higher than my own self, and everybody like walked bent over because of the bag and shit. That was the case. Like Indian education system is like that. It's changing slowly, but it's something like that. So it's basically pressure like, what are you, uneducated? If you're uneducated, like it's gonna be hard to find like match or something in this arranged marriage thing, right? But that's so fucked up thing, man, when I really think about it, right? You're a woman, right? You go to college, you get a great degree in something like bachelor's or like a master's degree in, not engineering. When I was in engineering, like there's barely any few women there, right? Today also that's changed. That was 10 years ago. Now today that is also changing. But engineering is not something, yeah. But anything outside work, like, but that's the case around the world. Like when it comes to engineering things, women try to not go there. But when you have like something like master's or something in, let's just say doctorate, right? Or in doctor field, right? Even if you get PhD or something in science or something, imagine that you get married in like, oh, by the way, it's our family's thing, women don't work. How fucked up is that? Like, I just studied all these things to do what? Do nothing? I don't know, man. That's really fucked up. I'm glad that's changing. I hope that changes faster.
In a recent survey, 75% of teenage girls said they hope to find a job after graduating. The problem is that wages aren't high enough to convince their families. The real mystery, then, is why Indian wages are still so incredibly low. Since 1990, its economy has grown at an impressive average rate of 6% a year, not so far behind China's miraculous 8.8%. Back then, India was only the world's 12th largest economy. Today, it's the 5th. Yet, somehow this spectacular growth failed to create any jobs. Now, economists call the number of new...
Yeah, see, the thing with that is like the same curve thing, right? India economy is growing. Why? Because foreign companies like American companies and things are actually putting factories here. Why? Because wages are low. How is wages are low? Because people are paid less. That's the whole thing, right? India is in the middle of that. Before India can become big enough to make their own thing, become large enough that wages might increase, where they can do, I mean, Make in India is already becoming bigger and bigger. Like Indian things are rising. At that point, you can pay higher wages. But when companies from outside decide to put factory in your country, of course, they're going to pay you less. That's why they're here. Otherwise, why would they be here, right? So India is in the middle of that, right? It's like slowly it will start to rise up.
Jobs produced for every 1% change in GDP, the elasticity of labor. Well, between 2011 and 19, the Indian labor force grew by 0.26%, imputing an elasticity of 0.04, which is a polite way of saying virtually zero jobs were created over 10 years. This implies that if its economy were to double overnight, employment would only increase by 4%. Between 1999 and 2005, 60 million new jobs appeared. Between 2004 and 10, just 3.
Yeah, but autonomy is also... Autonomy? What is it called? Yeah, the machines are at fault here as well, right? Because 10, 15 years ago, even though Western world had machines, India weren't really doing that. Like mostly were dependent on labor. Jobs increased, people got more jobs, but people who already had jobs kind of lost it because machines were introduced. So yeah, economy is, going like higher and higher, but machines are doing a lot of jobs, right? In factories and things. I build factories, I know, like machines are like increasing, right? Like that's the case everywhere, but in India it's going to explode because of population and how it's slowly modernizing. It wasn't before. It wasn't modern before. Now it's modernizing. So machines are going to get introduced.
The result is fierce competition for every last scrap of paid work. In 2019, 12 million people applied for 35,000 railroad jobs and 1.7 million for 1,500 jobs at a state-owned bank. Most of these applicants are young, and the vast majority college-educated. Those who are both young and college-educated don't stand a chance. Today, 42% of Indians under 25 with graduate degrees can't find work. So, what do all these young scholars do? They go back to school, of course, fueling a race to acquire an increasing number of unnecessary credentials or else fall behind. Others simply lose hope and spend their days doing what Indians call time pass, aimless leisure. Now, one clue to the whereabouts...
Not really. You can't make money doing time pass. They try to do any job they can. Most, like the one who get even more graduated basically leaves the country, go to some other like Europe or US, right? That's why Indians are rising everywhere else, right? Because yeah, India has an extreme problem with like finding middle jobs, middle class type of way. There was a stat like 90% of all the money that India has is for the top 20%. Other 80% are really poor, which is like if 1.4 billion. So that 80% is like, what the fuck? I'm guessing 20% obviously, but that like 80% is insane, right? Government need to really see this shit. Like this is one of the biggest issue of India. Not just the biggest issue of India, right? Which is going to cause problem in the future if not get addressed right now. I mean, obviously, like Modi government is doing a lot of things when it comes to women, right? Incentivizing like subsidies and things, putting more favors if women do this, if women go to this type of like education, like certain money government will give them, or sometime even free education type of shit, right? Modi government is doing a lot of that to incentivize people to do certain things, get into certain jobs, but I don't know, man.
Whereabouts of these missing jobs is the country's most common occupation. Not salesperson, waiter, or janitor, but CEO. Truly. You see, contrary to the image of sweatshops many around the world imagine, Indian employers are actually quite tightly regulated. Legally, they must provide workers with paid leave, pensions, and health insurance. They even need permission from the government to fire.
Yeah. Okay. Forgot the fucking PPF? PPF. Fixed provident fund to the workers, right? I do that as well, right? I have like whole government number and everything, right? Our government constantly keeps track of every 15 to 20 days, like, okay, you're working there, where's the wages of like your workers, this and that, right? It's a mandatory to do that. Not that like, you know, you can give the balance to your worker and show them received. No, I don't care about that. You have to mandatory like give them provident fund and things like that through government, you know, things like that. So government is in the middleman, right? And it has to be government, right? So government is the middleman where like these workers can go to government will basically give them money. So workers don't get screwed. If private company is involved, there's a chance they might get screwed. If government is involved, government is held accountable. So there are, you know, many, you know, measures like that involved, and that all of that, you know, rose really high in past 10 years.
Or lay them off. At least in principle. In practice, most of these laws only apply to businesses with 10 or more employees.
I mean, yeah.
And unrelatedly, for some odd reason, Indian companies seem to have decided 9 is the optimal number of workers. So, what do you know? The vast majority of businesses are exempt from these regulations. Another reason they state—
I mean, I don't know. I feel like BS coming there. Like these companies might deliberately not register certain people. Let's say you are like 20-25 people and they're like just show 9 and they cycle through those people, and like anybody who comes to check just like fill their pockets or something. Corruption is going to be high. It's India. Like I said in the start of the video, India is really hard country to regulate. 1.4 billion people is really hard to regulate. How India is doing anything is surprising in the first place, right? How is government doing anything at that point, right? But slowly it's getting better and better because like technology is getting better, like online signature is getting better every day. So Indian government is really hardly putting pressure on that system. Like everything should be online, I don't care what. So computers can suddenly see the anomalies, and that's becoming much higher. That's why Aadhaar card became a thing when Modi came to power, right? Modi did a lot of these things that pissed off people, but it worked in this favor. Like, you know, like people don't fall through the cracks, right? There is the online, right? And slowly it's just getting better from there.
Small is to evade corruption. Companies with 10 or more workers are visited by labor inspectors, many of which enforce arcane rules to extract bribes. Thus, whereas China has a healthy balance of mid-sized companies, many of which have between 51 and 200 workers, over 80%—
Yeah, I'll say about this, about China. It's communism, it's never good, but your everyday people are going to be scared to take bribes. I mean, the government will do that, like corruption is much higher, sure. But anything outside of that, like if, or you did something to like detriment to the idea of communism and Chinese Communist Party, you're disappeared. No judge, no court, no nothing. That's a scary prospect. So everyday people are going to be really scared to take bribe. What if somebody complains to the CCP? So in that area, like China was like better. So like they slowly just grow and grow. Well, India is going to have a problem with that. Democracy problems, let's just say.
Of Indian apparel firms, for instance, have less than 8. With so many small businesses, it's no wonder India has perhaps the world's highest density of CEOs. As companies grow, rather than hire more workers, they simply outsource this additional labor to other small companies. But this loophole, clever as it is, has a cost. Smaller companies are less productive. On average, those with 50 to 199 workers are about 60% less productive than those with over 200, and those with 5 to 49 workers about 90% less productive. Lower productivity means lower wages. Lower wages means less consumer demand, and less demand means fewer jobs. Not just fewer, but also lower quality. Only 21% of Indian workers earn regular wages. Of them, 46% don't receive any paid leave, 53% don't receive social security, and nearly 60% have no written contract at all.
Social security,
this flexibility, as employers call it, is stressful and unpredictable during the best of times.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I see like Germans, some British, I don't know, I hope not Americans, living in India. I'm like, should you check out a psychiatrist or something? Why are you here? why? Okay, in which universe is Germany even compared to India? Like just living, I mean, anyone with even two brain cell would choose Germany over India, living there every single day. Like every time I see in streets, like the fuck is your, why are you here? why did you choose India of all places? I don't know. Like, okay, there are small markets which is like no European Union, right? No, not much of regulation and things. So India can be a killer. But even then, like living in India, you can still do business in India, but don't have to live here. So I don't know. But yeah, I think, most, street foods and like you just see like they're making a lot of like small jobs as it goes. It's not really registered. They are not required to pay income tax, right? Below, I think 7 lakh, what is 7 lakh? 700,000. Below 700,000 rupees annually, you don't have to pay taxes below that number, right? So people usually don't choose to register their business at all, right? Like, who cares? So those people will not show up as like employees, workers, or anything. So people would just automatically assume like, okay, 20% are employed and everybody else is not employed. But no, they're probably doing something that is not registered. There's many of them, right? I mean, even if you go to rural places, people are not like, it's like, what is a Bengal famine or something? Everybody's just hungry and just like fucked up. So that's not the case in India. So I bet most of these statistics are warped because of that.
Things are anything less than peachy, these informal jobs become downright catastrophic. Like, say, during a global pandemic. In 2020, the Prime Minister declared what began as a 3-week national lockdown, which immediately put 100 million Indians out of work, who fled en masse to the countryside, the only place they could go.
Seriously, man, this okay, I'm pausing too much, but it's my topic. It's India. I can talk about it all day. This panicked me. US is just like, okay, this $1 trillion, I'm gonna give money to people $1 trillion because of America. India can't do that. And I panic, like, okay, there are people who sell, like, I don't know, like peanuts, roasted peanuts as a job every day, who makes close to no money. That is nothing. I bet beggars in America gets more money than that. And people live their life in small hut type of place. Family lives there. Just thinking about it hurts me, right? Every time I just think about it, right? The day I started to think about this thing, like grew up enough to think about this thing, any beggar I see, like doesn't matter what, I always like give them money. I'd never like, every time I see them, okay, I have to give them money because I know this situation. And this reaction channel is like watching all these videos and things. It just amplifies that. During the pandemic, how did they survive? Obviously, a lot of them had land in rural places where they can farm. That's the one denominator in all Indians, basically. They have some land for farming in some rural village they can go back to. But what if somebody can't? How the fuck they survived? This is panic worthy, man. Somebody really need to research and make video about like how many people really got screwed during the pandemic in India.
By December of that year, 75 million people had been plunged below the poverty line of $2 a day, according to Pew Research. But there's another, bigger, structural reason why India has so few jobs. Of the countries that successfully escaped poverty in the last 100 years, almost all have pursued the same tried-and-true development recipe. A rapid progression from agriculture to manufacturing to services, in that order. It worked for Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and now China. India, on the other hand, seems to have somehow missed this memo. By the time its economy liberalized in the early 1990s, China was already 10 years into this journey. And having started so late, Indian factories couldn't compete with their Chinese competitors. So they largely gave up. Instead, India skipped straight from agriculture to services, leaving out that very critical middle step in the recipe, manufacturing. Today, Vietnam, with a population of less than 100 million, exports more clothing than India, with a population of 1.4.
See, the state I live in is Gujarat, and manufacturing element of Gujarat is extremely high compared to all other state in India. Not all of the state, most of the states. And that is one of the major reasons why Modi was overwhelmingly voted in 2016, because he was a chief minister here for 20 years, 2 decades, right? And his first element was like basically all the capitalist thing you can think of. Factories, jobs, and in that way. Not like other party, Congress party was like, oh, I'm going to give you subsidies. I'm going to give you money. I'm going to give you free gas. Modi said, I'm not going to give you shit. I'm just going to give you like more jobs and factories and try to push in that direction. And since Modi came to power, like factories and manufacturing is rising. But if you set a trend, it's really, really hard to get out of, right? So it's a problem. But Modi is trying to like look at the weapons industry. Like India is now making manufacturing weapons now with the help of America, US and things, right? Biden came to like a year or so ago to like basically talk about this deal. US is going to put factories in India to manufacture weapons and things. So Modi's main core of like actually making shit is still there, right? So even though India missed a step, it's going back to because of Modi.
Billion. Now, there's nothing wrong with services. Nearly all rich countries are service economies, from the US to Japan and Switzerland. So you might think India found a shortcut. The country has an impressive depth of finance, insurance, real estate, and technology expertise. Deloitte, Goldman, and Tata pay their Indian consultants and bankers top dollar, much more, of course, than most factory workers.
Like I said, India could be 4 countries. The names you're speaking of are really rich people, even compared to American things. Top 10 rich people in places like that. Tata owns Land Rover and Jaguar and things like that, amongst many things, right? So, yeah, Reliance is like 4th richest or something. Adani is like 3rd richest or something. So you're talking of people with like, yeah, much higher, right? If you like take 150 million people, the richest of them all, and put it on another island, that would be the richest country on the planet, right? That's the problem here, right? So you can't just go to service, and manufacturing is the meat of things. If your whole country wants to be rich like China did, you can't skip that.
The problem is that there just aren't that many of these jobs. As Indian farmers have grown more productive, as they have across the globe, agriculture has been on a steady decline. No surprise there. Usually, however, all these farmers would become factory workers.
That is a surprise there, because India's agriculture hub, or at least was. I was surprised how much India is actually doing in agriculture in the past 2-3 years. They're like, what the fuck? I thought it was much higher. But it was, but now it's not.
One labor-intensive industry replaced with another. But, as you can see, manufacturing hasn't absorbed these displaced farmers. Sure, these new service jobs have helped, just not nearly enough. So, in order to make up the difference, Indians have flocked to construction. These jobs are often temporary, low-paid, and physically dangerous. But this trend is particularly bad for women. In East Asia, where manufacturing replaced agriculture, women became factory workers, which slowly influenced social expectations and afforded them newfound freedom.
Yeah, see, when it comes to manufacturing, that is so true. The wages are insanely low for workers, right? And that's a problem even for somebody who like employs them, like me, right? Because if you give them that less of a wage, they're not going to be really motivated to work, and like that's a problem. So a lot of people like me, construction, I don't know how many, but basically someone like me, what we started to do is like incentivize based on like item, right? Let's say you give 500 rupee to a technical worker a day, like 8 hours to work something. Now he could put, like, let's say in a bathroom, install EWCs, like 3-4 water closets and things like that, right? For 500 rupees. Why the fuck would he do that? How I incentivize, like, I'm going to give you 1,000 rupee per EWC, right? It's, it's up to you to how much you like installing things. So clearly they are going to be incentivized. Now he's going to put like 5-6 EWC in a day. He made 6,000 rather than 500 I would have given, right? There's a balancing act when it comes to like installing pipes and things, but overall worker gets much higher money this way. They're incentivized, so they do it faster. Obviously safety based, right? Not too fast, but fast enough. Time is money when it comes to construction, right? If I can do a job in like 6 months instead of like 2 years, I can find another job, another contract after 6 months. So it works both way. I make more money, worker makes more money. It's like better wages that way, right? So yeah, but yeah, wages are insanely low if you just give them wages.
In India, women were pushed out of farming but discouraged from taking on construction. A few lucky women secured lucrative service jobs, but the vast majority simply left the labor market altogether. They had nowhere to go. This is why India...
I don't know if I should say this or not. Some kind of a union might be needed for construction, let's just say, in India, for wages based things, so wages increases. I don't know, there are unions, but when it comes to like I think unions should really focus on like we need to increase construction wages, right? At least in like factory areas and things like that, right? Industrial areas, right? Because there's more incentive there, right? Industries like rich in general, they can pay higher wages, and there is more risk there as well because industry is riskful, right? So something like that.
India's economy continued to grow. Those new service jobs are very, very productive, while the number of jobs did not. They're few and far between. It's why women in Bangladesh work at much higher rates. Its many factories provide them with a socially acceptable place to do so, whereas India has no such scale. What India does have that most of Asia does not is time. China's population peaked last year, and its labor force is expected to decrease by about 1% each year starting in 2030. India, meanwhile, is still very much young and growing. 40% of its population is under the age of 25, and 53% under 30. Its median age is a youthful 28, compared to China's 38, or Japan's 48. With any luck, India has about 2 decades remaining in its demographic window. A critical...
The problem is that time comes with an expiration date, right? If India don't capitalize on that fast, there will be a time where there will be reversed. Now more old people and like you're screwed. But yeah, Modi had like 25 or 30-year plan when he came to power, up to like 2040 or something. He's like putting a lot of he has a long vision, right? He's putting a lot of things in place to go towards that vision if he stays in power, right? Or if his party stays in power. So I don't know. You can say a lot of things about Modi, but he's a smart man, right? He know the vision. Like I said, he was chief minister of a state for 20 years before he became prime minister, and he's been prime minister for 8 years. So like it's like 28 or something years in in power area where he can govern an entire place. Before he was governing a state, now he's governing the whole country. He can do this.
Transition period during which a country has a large number of working age people compared to children and retirees. If the country can harness this labor, it could still experience a taste of the demographic dividend that propelled China from a poor to a middle-income country. By merely employing women at the same rate as men, according to Bloomberg, India's economy could grow by nearly a third by 2050. But if it wastes this opportunity, these excess young people could become a demographic burden.
There you go.
In that case, it would be stuck with millions of angry, aimless, and unemployed 20, 30, and 40-year-olds. Simply put, India has no time to waste, which means it may need some help from David Allen in his book Getting Things Done, on today's sponsor, Imprint. In it...
Yeah, well, go to original video pages and from there support this channel, or go to imprintapp.com/polymatter. Man, I mean... Look, I try to not pick sides. If any of you been watching my channel for past few years, like my mentality doesn't side in. Mostly it's educated thing, right? I go like issue by issue. I don't have a side. But when it comes to like political parties, I hope BJP stays in power with all their flaws, because Congress has this socialist mentality, which is not good for all these things, right? Like young population, manufacturing, and like it can get better, and BJP can get there. But if Congress comes to power with their socialist mentality, we are fucked, right? These people will get old, and now the issue is going to be much larger, amplified back then. And currently, with all the issues Modi have, or all the issues that were amplified in people's eyes, he didn't come with as much majority as he did in the past, which means next election he might not even be prime minister or something, or BJP might not be in power. At that point, I can only hope that Congress sees what BJP did and follow that, and not their socialist mentality of just giving shit away, right? There's a precedent. Someone in Congress few decades ago came to power and gave shit away to free. Grain stores were emptied out. There were literally no food to eat. He had to like step down. That type of shit. So I don't know, man. But yeah, I'm hoping like India is big enough and like smart enough to not do that again. But who knows? Stupidity of people is always like astonishing. But who knows? However, that was why 75% of Indian women are unemployed, because most people are unemployed. Women are like culturally is not really incentivized or even like stopped by family, which is fucked up when I think about it. You get master's degree and like, oh yeah, you can't work. That would piss me off. I'm not gonna lie. If I were a woman and if I were in that position, I would say, fuck you. I'm gonna get a job. I'm gonna go to major cities. I have a master's degree. You know what? I'll leave India and go somewhere else where I'm appreciated or something. I don't know. But yeah. Right, if you like my reaction, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.